Dr. Hirsch.
And I'm Jim Carney. And this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
If it's true, as they say, that print is dead and newspapers are toast, then why are so many students still declaring journalism majors and applying to journalism schools? How is the changing face of journalism affecting the education of today's future journalists? Journalists and professors Miguel Pérez and Bernard Stein will join us for a look at journalism education today.
A few years ago, the City University of New York decided to launch the newest graduate school of journalism in the nation. Later in the program, I'll visit the school and speak to its founding dean, Stephen Shepard. But first, in the new modern world of journalism, technology is king. The old image of the cigarette-smoking reporter slaving over an Underwood manual typewriter is dead. Now, journalists must, of course, be able to write, but must also master various technologies. Today, this program, for the first time, is coming to you in high definition from the new Lehman Studios Multimedia Center. Here's a brief tour.
We are fascinated with the fact that we have state-of-the-art equipment now to teach journalism, the journalism of the 21st century.
This center provides an unprecedented level of technology and resources.
I'm going to have one class of film scoring music students. My goal would be to, first of all, teach them everything I know and also help them to try to figure out a way they can make a living in music, because that's the challenge. And the physical facility is great. They're a big live, multi-use audio video recording room is spectacular. And one of the nice things about this facility is that if you did want to bring a chamber orchestra in, you could do it. You got the room.
It is exactly the right environment in which to experiment with approaches that help keep the humanities relevant in the digital age. My horizon is to be able for people to understand that what distinguishes Lehman from all other schools in the New York metropolitan area, and maybe even on a broader horizon, is the degree to which media and visual literacy are infused in every aspect of all the programs.
We are about to make out of this multimedia center a great contribution to the Bronx in general, to the city of New York.
Today, I'm joined by two CUNY professors who are also prize-winning journalists. Bernard Stein of Hunter College and the Graduate School of Journalism was the editor of the award-winning Riverdale Press for 30 years, and he is also a Pulitzer Prize winner for his editorial writing. He has also started two not-for-profit papers, the Hunts Point Express and the Mott Haven Herald. Professor Miguel Pérez of Lehman College is an award-winning reporter and a contributor to CNN. He won the Mike Berger Award for his daily news columns. He is also a radio and television talk show host. Welcome to EdCast.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're here to talk about the changing face of journalism and what that means for students today. We opened the show with a quote that said, "Print's dead and newspapers are toast." Do you agree with that?
I don't.
Okay.
And in fact, I published two newspapers, old-fashioned newspapers on newsprint, and the reason is fairly simple. These newspapers serve poor communities where people don't have steady access to the internet. And they need, if they're going to have news, they need it still in newsprint. In my students' lifetime, there may not be ink on paper, but in our lifetime, it's still very relevant.
So there's still a place for the newspaper. And yet, we can't deny that journalism is changing. So when you educate students to become journalists, and both of you are working with students now, what do you think is the kind of education that today's journalists need? What do they need to know about?
Well, it's a smaller place for newspapers and a growing place for the rest of the media. And the media is transforming right before our eyes, has been for a few years now. And what that means for future journalists is being able to work across platforms, being able to do in front of the camera as well as behind the camera a great job. Being able to work on the internet, being able to design websites, being able to use Twitter to gather information and to disseminate that information. They have to be up with the 21st century.
That's absolutely true, Miguel, but it's also the eternal verity. They have to be able to gather information and present it accurately in whatever platform they're using.
Now you're talking about accuracy, and that's an interesting comment, because one of the things that concerns people is that traditional media, like the New York Times, I suppose, has a lot of fact checkers. I mean, you write an article for the Times, I'm assuming that somebody looks, we know they make mistakes, but generally people are looking at it. People working at home on a blog can pretty much say whatever they want, and nobody fact checks. So what do you tell students today about accuracy? I mean,
well, that's
how
the
do you
danger.
instill that in them? What do you do?
Well, that's the danger. You have to learn how to do the right research and learn how to base your research on the right websites and not blogs, because blogs can come from anyone at this point, and they're not really trustworthy for a newsman or for a news lady. And the fact, you know, bottom line, and I go back to your point, it goes back to writing. It goes back to news gathering. It goes back to the basics. If our students don't know that, they don't know anything. And you know, there's a lot of students who come to us and say, "Oh, I want to be in front of the camera. I want to be a star." And the first question I ask them is, "Do you know how to write?" Because if you don't know how to write, you're not going to get in front of the camera.
So is writing an important component for both of you at the graduate level and at the undergraduate level?
Absolutely.
Or the senior college and the community?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The thing about the web is that it gives us and our students even more, because I'm an old-fashioned guy who's just learning these things from my students, the opportunity to enhance their storytelling. If you use the web just because you can, if you use the ability to do a slideshow or a video or an audio, but with no real reason that makes the story a more compelling one, then you're doing something wrong. But if you use those tools to enhance that storytelling and to make it more interesting to your audience, then you've got a wonderful tool to use.
You know, you hear the gloomy predictions, you know, that newspapers are dying and there's a changing world of journalism, and yet the enrollment in journalism schools and journalism programs is going up. There is data to show that it is going up. Why do you think it's going up?
Well, here at Lehman College, we think it's going to go up tremendously.
First, got this great student.
Because we have this great new facility, this new multimedia center. We have a brand new curriculum that we just introduced, multimedia journalism. It replaces our old mass comm communication program, and it also replaces our multilingual journalism program. It's all under one roof now, multimedia journalism. We preserve our commitment to multilingual. We have a track for students who still want to pursue a multilingual career, but we also have a track for broadcasting and a broadcast for print. Everybody has to, there's a core group of courses that everybody has to take, and the new major is multimedia journalism. We're very, very excited about it.
And as you said earlier, that multimedia journalism teaches them all of the skills that they need to know, both print and digital, against everything. Now, why do you think enrollment's
Well, at Hunter
going up?
College, we regard the journalism concentration, it's within the Department of Film and Media Studies, as a liberal arts course of studies. It's not a vocational course of study. We're happy indeed if some of our students, when they graduate, become journalists, but I tell my students from the first basic reporting class on that if they are able to gather information, evaluate it, and present it compellingly, that they have learned a skill that will stand them in very good stead if they become an attorney, a doctor, a stockbroker, operate a not-for-profit, or whatever it is that they choose to do in life. And so that's really the focus. Now, we also, though, are quite multimedia. We're fortunate that we're in a film and media studies department because we've got documentary filmmakers, we've got people who are experts in digital media, and then we've got people who are old-fashioned writers and reporters like me, and we're able to bring a curriculum together that allows students to learn all of those skills.
Do you think for students, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, I think there is that lure of being able to find out about a story, to investigate something. I mean, regardless of the job outlook later, I think students still want to be a part of that. I think that, I mean, the world around us is moving so quickly, so many things are happening, news is breaking as we're speaking. Doesn't that also appeal to students, you think, to get into the thick of that, to be a part of that, to be part of making change?
And my students have a very strong sense of social justice.
Okay.
And these newspapers, the Hunts Point
Let's
Express
talk about
and
these newspapers for a minute. Tell us
and the
about
Mott
them.
Haven Herald, their goal is to provide neighborhoods that could not be served by a commercial newspaper because the people who live there don't have the disposable income that advertisers are interested in, to provide them with the same kind of news and information that the Riverdale Press provided my readers in Riverdale with and continues to provide the readers in Riverdale with. And students respond tremendously well to the notion that they're not writing for a professor, they're writing for a real audience, and they have an obligation to do that very well.
And these community newspapers, they serve very well the students who may want to move on eventually to a daily newspaper. When I was a recruiter for a daily newspaper, and I used to go to these job fairs to recruit reporters, what I would look for was obviously reporters who were journalists who were ready for a daily newspaper. When they were not ready, I would say find a community newspaper, get some clippings, get some bylines, get published, and then come back to me. So the community newspapers are a terrific training ground, just like our college newspapers are terrific great training ground. This is what they need. Nowadays, while they're in college, our students have to take advantage of the fact that they can get bylines, they can get DVDs, produce television shows, actually. And then once they graduate, they can really look for a job with this stuff.
Yeah. And these newspapers have websites that use all the tools we've just been talking about, so students are able to both practice that and showcase that. And then in my regular reporting classes, we also now, my students each have their own blog, and they post their work after they've revised it on the blog with, again, all of these tools insofar as they've learned them. These are the younger undergraduates. They make use of those as well.
Jim Carney had the opportunity to speak to founding Dean Steven Shepard at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, so let's take a look and see what he has to say on this.
As times have changed, so has the need for journalism education to evolve. The CUNY Graduate School of Journalism is training the next generation of journalists to thrive in a changing environment. Steven Shepard, the former editor-in-chief of Business Week, has been at the helm of the school since its inception 4 years ago. We began our conversation by discussing the genesis of the program.
A bunch of the colleges that have undergraduate programs were sort of thinking they should start their own master's programs. And CUNY Chancellor Matthew Goldstein said, look, if we're going to do it, we'll do it university-wide at the CUNY level. We'll have a CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. And so that's how it started. It is the only publicly funded graduate school, not just in New York City, but in the entire Northeast. So there was a need for it, and therefore public universities have this as part of their mission, to provide opportunities to people who can't afford the good private universities. But he said, look, I want you to make this one of the best programs in the country, you know, and that's what we're trying to do.
What is the mission of the graduate school?
We started 4 years ago, which turns out to be a very fortuitous time because the professional journalism was just starting to change, the transition towards digital journalism. And so we could see it coming. We didn't have all the answers, but we knew the general direction that we had to go. So we designed the school to offer a converged curriculum. That is, to teach all the eternal verities of traditional journalism, the reporting, the writing, the critical thinking, the ethical values of mainstream media, and combine it with all the new stuff, interactive multimedia, making the students fluent across media platforms. So the mission of the school is to train at the graduate level, master's degree, students who can compete and get hired in this new multimedia interactive journalism world.
Describe the typical student at the graduate journalism school.
On average, they're 26 years old, so they're not kids. We have some right out of college, but average age suggests that they've been out of college for 4 or 5 years. 2/3 of them, or 60% anyway, are women, which is fairly typical for these kinds of programs. We have about 40% are members of underrepresented minority groups. About 40% come from out of New York State. And it's a very diverse in every sense of that word, not just ethnicity, but backgrounds, geographic location, interests in journalism. About 10% of the students are international students. So it's really quite a broad mix of students, and they all hang out in the newsroom back there, and it's just great to see.
This is a beautiful facility. Talk a little bit about the equipment and the resources you have here.
Yeah, this is a very well-equipped school. It was built a little over 4 years ago when New York State had the money to do it, and it's really first rate. We have 40,000 square feet. This is the old New York Herald Tribune building, so we have nice DNA in the walls. We're right next door to the New York Times and within walking distance of 14 or 15 media companies in New York, as well as Silicon Alley startups not too far away. So the location is fabulous. The facility is great. It's entirely wireless. So all the students have Macintosh laptops, and wherever they are in the school, they are online. So it's very good. We have a broadcast studio, we have editing suites, we have well-equipped classrooms.
We'll talk a little bit about the faculty. Where do you draw faculty from?
Well, there are about a dozen full-time faculty and about 10 or so consortial faculty from other CUNY colleges, including 4 Pulitzer Prize winners who are within the CUNY system somewhere, and they come and teach a course here. And then we use adjuncts from the profession. I mean, if you're in New York City, one of the great advantages, and all the schools in New York do this, is to use adjuncts from the profession who come in and teach a course. And of course, the students are thrilled to be taught by somebody from the New York Times or NBC News. And of course, they become mentors and they become contacts, and sometimes those adjunct faculty help students get internships and jobs.
Where do graduates from the program go? Where do you expect them to be?
Yeah, it's a tough job market, but they're doing very, very well. Ours is a 3-semester program, so we graduate students in December. So 4 or 5 months out, we now know that about 75% of the students who graduated have some kind of a job in the media world. Some of them are employed full-time, traditional job, benefits, and so on. Many of them are part of the contingent workforce. They are freelancing on a regular basis for the Daily News or some place like that. And some of them are permalance. They just attach themselves to a publication and ultimately get hired. But there are places, the 3 classes who've graduated so far, students are at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Daily News and CBS and ABC, a bunch of websites, a bunch of community newspapers, some startups. There's a whole interest in entrepreneurial journalism here. The students want to get out and really create something new using the new technologies, and we encourage that.
Do you think that the relative youth of the program and the school has allowed the attitude of the school to be a little bit different from traditional journalism graduate programs? Yeah,
that's what I mean. I said we were lucky we started when we did, because everybody understood that there had to be a need for innovation. And because we were a new school, everybody understood we would innovate. And I like to think after 4 years that we still have the spirit of a startup and the energy of a startup.
Now, back to Linda and her guest in the studio.
He obviously feels there is a future for journalism and that students are being trained for something that is meaningful for them.
I teach at the Graduate School of Journalism, and the Graduate School of Journalism is on the cutting edge of the things that we've been talking about in terms of cross-platform work. And it's really very exciting to see these students not only learn the fundamentals of reporting, but also be able to create these astonishing multimedia pieces.
You did mention earlier that you tell students that the kind of training and the experience they get in a journalism school or program will serve them well in a variety of different jobs or careers. But looking at the careers in journalism, if it's true that print media is drying up a bit and newspapers are laying off people, what do you see as the forecast for jobs in journalism for students who graduate in programs?
Right now, I've already helped students get internships as segment producers on TV shows, cable TV shows, and national radio. So segment producers.
You want to explain to us what a segment producer is?
Well, a segment producer is a person who plans a segment, invites the guest, prepares the questions, does the research, and then prepares everything for the host to do one particular segment on one particular topic. Segment producers are in high demand right now because we have so many cable stations, and these are the people. This is where the jobs are, and this is where the internships are. So we have to open the eyes of our students so they can go out and get that training even while they're still in college.
Our students are finding work.
Where are they
They're finding work at, almost every newspaper now, from the smallest to the largest, also has a website. And these newly minted students, graduates, have the skills that some of the older editors and reporters don't have. They're able to do the web production, for example. They're able to go out and cover the story with a camera, with a laptop computer, no flash, be able to get that from the automobile to the web in a matter of minutes after they've done their reporting. So those are skills that are very much in demand, and students are, in fact, when they graduate, getting jobs.
Are they getting full-paying jobs? I know we're looking at online. I'm doing a lot of research for this. I'm looking at people who are saying yes, there are jobs online, but they're not really paying as much as the traditional.
I'm talking about the New York Times. I'm talking about Newsday. I'm talking about the largest papers in the country as well as the smallest, and so they're getting the pay scale of an entry-level reporter at those news organizations.
But there's also the reality that our students need to face the fact that sometimes they have to leave the city.
That's a good point. Okay, you can't always work in New York.
Go to a smaller market. Even when I was at the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, they were telling most of us who were graduating, don't expect to stay in New York. And it was the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, very prestigious school. So, undergraduates, especially undergraduate students, cannot expect to find a daily newspaper reporting job in New York. It's not going to happen. But there are possibilities elsewhere, all over the country.
That's a good point.
And I would say, Miguel, that nowadays, they really do need to go to journalism school. When I was at the press, people would come to me for advice. I'd say, get a job at a small newspaper like the Riverdale Press, where you're in a teaching newsroom, and that's the best way to learn the craft. But I don't say that anymore because of all the things that we've been talking about, of the technical ability that you need to have. I really think that undergraduates who want a career in journalism should be thinking about going to graduate school, if not immediately after graduation, then after a year or two.
I think that's becoming true of so many jobs today. They're specialized, and you really can't just pick, you really have to have the training for it. Then that begs the question, of course, again, what do today, in general, we're running out of time, so what do today's students need to know to be successful journalists? What do they have to have when they go out there? What do you want to make sure they know and that they can do?
I went to a journalist conference not too long ago. There were
like
three or 400 people in the audience, and there was a guy from CNN, this executive producer from CNN, who says, I'm going to open all these new bureaus, one-person bureaus all over the country, and obviously this person needs to know the following. And he listed all the things that this person needed to know, and when he was finished, no one in the room qualified.
They need to be curious, they need to be caring, they need to have a notion that the reason for being a journalist is to serve a readership or an audience.
Do they need an entrepreneurial spirit? I mean, to find a place for themselves, to be sure to make themselves a career if necessary?
That's one of the alternatives, certainly. And more, that's an alternative that at the J School, for instance, is being emphasized. But I also think that there are jobs in newsrooms, and that not everyone has to be an entrepreneur in order to be a good journalist.
And for the online operations, there are now a number of online operations that are not really affiliated with a paper like the New York Times. Do you think that, and maybe this is the future in some ways, do you think they'll be able to support the kind of reporting that the old traditional institutions, I mean, I think this is what concerns me, and I always tell people that maybe we have seduced people into believing that news can be free, when maybe it really can't be free, because somebody has to pay for a reporter to embed himself with troops, to go undercover. What do you see as the future of that kind of journalism and paying for that?
As the media merges, I think that the websites are going to be multimedia.
Okay. And what does that mean, the multimedia?
The advertising is going to come in, not because of the print component necessarily, but maybe because of the television component. You see websites for networks right now that are getting the advertising. Why? Because on the air, they promote the website. So those multimedia websites are the ones who are going to be successful in getting the advertising.
I'd say it's an open question that we don't know yet exactly what the formula is going to be, whether we're going to have to start paying for online reporting or not. We really don't know.
How would we not have to pay for online reporting? You think advertising will
Well, for example,
cover that,
you see new experiments. ProPublica, which is a not-for-profit website, web-only reporting operation, has just won a Pulitzer Prize. And does investigative reporting, something that in many traditional news organizations has been deemed too expensive. There are experiments going on all over the country. The New York Times is working with a co-op in the San Francisco Bay Area and another in the Chicago area. the local CUNY Graduate School of Journalism is a New York Times website. NYU is about to launch a partnership with the New York Times to cover the East Village. So there are all these experiments going on, and I don't think we know yet how it's all going to shake out. But I'm confident that people will always be able to get substantial and responsible news.
Investigative news.
Yeah, ProPublica is devoted entirely to investigative reporting, for example.
We only have about a minute left, so is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like our viewers to know about journalism today and educating journalists?
I think you covered everything.
I just want to reiterate that I'm confident that news has a future, and the reason I'm confident is because I think it's so essential to democracy that it must have a future.
I hope you're right, because I have too many students who believe that Wikipedia gives them all the truth they need to know. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Professors Bernard Stein and Miguel Pérez. Thank you so much for joining us on EdCast. And now, don't go away. We'll be right back with our EdBytes.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have any suggestions or comments, drop us an email at our email address.
And now for this edition of EdBytes.
Single-sex schools are becoming increasingly popular as a way of improving the academic success of boys of color. But Education Week reports that a new study into the effectiveness of single-sex public schools for Latino and African-American males reveals that these schools do not have a better academic outcome than their mixed-gender counterpart. According to Pedro Noguera, an author of the study, there is no magic to separating boys.
Educators recognize the importance of participation in after-school programs for adolescents and teenagers, but unfortunately, students often don't sign up or stop attending them. A new study from the Harvard Family Research Project recommends that if schools want kids to join and stick with these programs, they should be given lots of leadership opportunities. The program should also be community-based, enroll 100 or more kids, and make sure that staff members develop relationships with participants.
The May issue of Developmental Psychology reports on studies that show that while most Latino students enter kindergarten with the same social skills as middle-class white kids, those early gains disappear if the children attend low-quality schools and live in low-income neighborhoods. Researchers believe schools should capitalize on this enthusiasm and eagerness children have when they start school before other factors erode some of these advantages.
A new federal study reveals that supplemental reading programs that are supposed to improve students' reading comprehension are not very successful. Only one, Roundabout, showed a positive effect, and this was only when the teachers had a year's experience with the program. One program, Reading for Knowledge, even had a negative effect. The search continues.
Well, that does it for this edition of EdCast.
Until next time, class dismissed.
EdCast is made possible in part by contributions from
Lesh & Lesh, your Bronx attorneys.